Welcome to Nonprofit Stories, inspiring tales from Silicon Valley. We will explore the transformative work of nonprofit organizations and leaders who are changing our community by tackling some of the most pressing issues facing Silicon Valley. So without further ado, let's dive into this exciting conversation. Today, we welcome Olivia Chiang, the founder and president at Let's Talk Unite of Silicon Valley. Let's Talk Unite is a youth-led nonprofit movement dedicated to reducing political polarization through stimulating collaborative dialogue and addressing our personal biases. Silicon Valley's political discourse issues. In an era where every headline has weight, trust shapes our reality. A striking Gallup poll shows a deep partisan split. 73% of Democrats versus 10% of Republicans trust the media. It's a divide that ripples through our democracy. Political weariness is real, with 65% of Americans overwhelmed by division. Meanwhile, a Pew survey reveals a similar partisan split in trust towards medical scientists during COVID-19. Now is the moment to come together, find common ground, and strengthen our collective trust. United, we stand resilient.
Olivia, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today.
Absolutely. Give us a brief background about your organization. Who do you serve? And how did it all begin?
Well, it began around 2020 amidst the very contentious 2020 presidential election with Democratic nominee Joe Biden and Republican nominee Donald Trump. We saw a lot of valence-based campaigning as opposed to policy-based campaigning during their run for president. And I thought that was really interesting. Why were they attacking the characteristics of these opponents instead of addressing their policy positions, especially in a run to decide the future of policymaking for the United States? And 2021 also sparked my interest, especially in the January 6th Capitol insurrection. We saw 2,000 rioters storm the Capitol, climb walls, go into the Capitol. Unfortunately, 5 people died and numerous others were injured. But what shocked me was that there were ordinary citizens committing these acts of political violence. There were firefighters, policemen, physicians even, people who dedicate their lives to promoting the well-being and safety of other people, committing an act that ended up killing people. So I wondered what could cause ordinary citizens to commit such an act of political violence. And I came across what's known as affective polarization, the tendency for partisans to detest, dislike, distrust people from the opposing party. And I thought, that's pretty prevalent in my own community. Speaking with 2 high school students from across the Bay Area, I realized it's actually really prevalent in even my school, a place that really promotes this idea of collaborative dialogue and a beloved community where everyone feels safe to be their full and true selves. Yet people said that in conversations with their classmates, they stifled their political ideology, and even discussions concerning education curriculum, immigration, affirmative action, things that really affect the core identity of who we are, but also things that affect our families, affect our communities, could not be talked about. They could not express their own opinions. They felt like they had to conform to the political ideologies of their teachers and classmates, and that really touched my heart. I feel like I had to do something to address this. And I came upon an interesting piece of research while watching a TED Talk, actually, where 2 researchers sent volunteers to a county in South Florida to talk about an upcoming anti-transgender bill. And these researchers sent volunteers to knock on the doors of residents one by one and have conversations with them. And what they found in the study is a substantial decrease in transphobia even after participants were exposed to counter-arguments, proving that a very polarized, contentious issue can be depolarized through a single conversation. And that inspired me to found Let's Talk Unite in 2021, a nonprofit dedicated to promoting collaborative dialogue and addressing our personal biases starting within my own community, within my school, neighborhoods, and I'm hoping will contribute to a national movement with what several organizations have indicated to be a global problem and trying to address this.
So share a story where your organization has changed somebody's life.
Yeah. Well, we host a few workshops each year, and one this year that really touched my heart was on Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day of 2023 in collaboration with the City of Palo Alto, City of East Palo Alto, and Oshman Family JCC, where over 1,200 community members came together to talk about their discriminatory experiences, and also their personal prejudices that have to do with race. And we saw kids, 7, 13 years old, even say, I've been labeled as a human calculator. I've had people say I'm so articulate, implying that someone who looks like me might not be. People saying that they've been labeled an exotic beauty in this day and age, in this society, the Bay Area.
Right.
And so it was really interesting to see how people across different racial identities can come together and find common ground about ways that they feel like they've experienced microaggressions. And another segment of this activity that we hosted at this event was talking about bias within Palo Alto, looking at law enforcement and maybe the ways that there have still been instances of discrimination and racial prejudice in our own community, as well as the ways that microaggressions can affect us. There's an interesting statistic that looks at how microaggressions can cause physical harm to someone, increase their stress levels, and cause other physical problems beyond the psychological harm that they can cause. So that was an amazing event. And another offering we have is Let's Talk Polarization podcast, featuring monthly dialogues with global scholars to talk about how affective polarization intersects with things like campaign strategy, vaccine hesitancy, religion, race, in other parts of our society, basically every segment of our society in ways that it's affected. Researchers have found that partisans will move home locations, swipe left on dating sites, and even shop in different grocery stores, all to avoid their out-partisans. So I thought, what else can I learn by interviewing scholars who have dedicated their life to researching such a phenomenon? And I am extremely grateful to all of the scholars, researchers, professors who are willing to engage with a high school student like myself, take time out of their day to inform the public about this issue and something that they are extremely knowledgeable about. So for example, in episode 7 of Let's Talk Polarization, we invite Dr. Joanna Bryson, a professor of ethics and technology at the Hertie School, to talk about how economic insecurity and decline can actually cause more polarized attitudes within partisans. And then in another episode, we invite the Associate Dean of Social Sciences at the University of California, San Diego, to talk about how one's religious identity can be directly correlated with a presidential voter choice, and how cases, landmark cases like Roe v. Wade and the recent Dobbs case can affect polarization and division even within religious groups, even within sects of Christianity, things of that sort. And then I realized I want to uplift underrepresented voices as well and foster dialogues, say and do the things that all of these scholars indicate can decrease polarization. So in a recent episode, we hosted religious leaders from across the United States. We had Christians, Muslims, Jewish individuals come together and talk about politics, how they became a religious leader, how religion influences the way they approach life, their political ideology, their internal values that guide what they do on a day-to-day basis. And it was really interesting because they found common ground on a lot of things. For example, the role that religion should have in the government, Now, they may not have disagreed. They may not have agreed about all things, for example, being pro-life versus pro-choice, but they did have a lot of empathy and tolerance for one another and emphasize the importance of such a thing in political dialogues across the nation. They say that it's important to value people even if they have different political ideologies, religious ideologies, and promote this idea of pluralism.
So today's youth is not interested in politics. What makes you interested in politics?
Oh, wow. Well, I've had a lot of great mentors who have supported me. I'm actually incredibly grateful for my friend Lucy, who inspired me to join debate at an early age and become engrossed with things like West African urbanization and female genital mutilation at such a young age, and realize that there are problems beyond my little Silicon Valley sphere that people are facing. People are facing issues with religious freedom, with authoritarian governments, with foreign issues. We even debated the Russia-Ukraine crisis, the war, while it was happening. I cut a card the morning of and ended up debating it in the evening. So I found that I was really passionate about all things politics. I wanted to make a change in my community, even as a young person. And I'm grateful for all of the adults in my life who told me that I could create a change and I could really affect political issues and become someone who inspires other people if I, work hard and continue with what I'm passionate about.
So which other mentors have played a critical role in creating your organization?
That's a great question. Well, last summer, I spent some time doing research with a graduate student named Shakir and learned so much about ways to be understanding of people across ideological differences. We interviewed scientific Christians about the perceived science-religion conflict. So, for example, many people find that scripture conflicts with scientific understandings on things like creationism versus evolution. We see that historically in the Scopes monkey trial, going back, and even today with people saying that we shouldn't be teaching evolution because it goes against their religious values. And we see conflict in the way that science curriculum is shaped, from sexual education to things like evolution. And he really encouraged me to approach each of these conversations with empathy and try to really deduct why people feel certain ways about this conflict and how to empathize with them. So I interviewed scientific Christians, ranging from mathematicians to virologists, who some adamantly believed that abortion is murdering a life. Others believed that abortion is a fundamental right. And it was important for me to continue being empathetic, continuing to smile throughout all of these conversations, because as a researcher and as someone who is trying to study this phenomenon, it's important to be unbiased. And of course, bias is something that you can't really control. You don't know that you're biased, but I always try to approach every conversation knowing that there's something I can learn, knowing that they've had experiences extremely different from my own, some that I've never experienced and will never experience. So try to approach things with humility and knowing that as a young person, there's no way that I'll have as much knowledge as someone who I might be interviewing.
Worried about the dilemma of selling first or buying first? TradeMyHome.com, powered by Your Home Sold Guaranteed Realty, has the solution. With our guaranteed 24-hour cash offers, you won't risk owning 2 homes or being homeless. You can buy first and sell later. Are you upgrading or downgrading in the next 3 to 6 months? Text PAIR to 408-740-7400 for a free and no-obligation professional equity appraisal report. Exclusively for Nonprofit Stories podcast viewers. For more information, visit TradeMyHome.com or call 408-740-7400. Remember, at trademyhome.com, your home is sold guaranteed or we'll buy it.
So share a story where your organization has faced some unique challenges, and how did you ended up resolving them?
I think one of the biggest issues within my organization is a lack of ideological and racial diversity. We are constrained by the demographics of the Bay Area being predominantly white and Asian, but I'm really hoping to get more volunteers and contributors on the podcast who have different ethnic and religious and ideological backgrounds, because I know that the more experiences, the better we can understand this phenomenon and the better we can understand it. Now, in the religious community, this is also an issue. The people who research affective polarization, especially those who have done really significant groundbreaking research on it, are predominantly white and older. And unfortunately, that means that the perspectives we have are predominantly white and older and very United States centric. So I'm really hoping to get divergent perspectives, and what our organization created this summer was a youth-oriented called opinion piece or editorial contest called The Future Is Now. We received a, I believe, $500 grant from the city of Palo Alto to host a editorial contest where we invited Palo Alto residents and Palo Alto students specifically to talk about their political and religious ideologies, especially those who feel like they've never had a platform to do so, who may be constrained by the people within their own community. And it was really interesting to read the responses. Some people talked about educational inequality and how it's something that they've invested their own life into tackling by joining numerous tutoring programs. Others said that as a homeschooled Christian, they felt like there really wasn't anyone else similar to them, and that contributed to struggles where they felt like they weren't heard or were being misrepresented in their communities.
And how do you collaborate and network to resolve some of these challenges?
Yeah, through my podcast, I'm really grateful that a lot of scholars, or maybe not a lot, the scholars who respond to us are really eager to talk about their personal experiences, talk about their personal struggles, right, and ways that they've overcome that in their own life, whether it be through gaining research or overcoming intolerance within themselves to engage with politically diverse people. And I'm hoping that all of that knowledge and experience becomes infused into my brain and I can better tackle these problems within my organization. And I'm also trying to actively recruit more volunteers across different schools, across different communities in order to better tackle this challenge.
What is a common misconception or myth which people have about your work and your organization?
Yeah, a common myth is that what I'm trying to do is promote political homogeneity, and that's absolutely not something we're trying to do. When they hear things like tackling affective polarization or finding common ground, it seems to imply to some people that we want everyone to think the same way. But that's not what's going to produce a successful democracy, stifling one ideology to promote another. That's not going to create a healthy democracy where there's a diversity in opinions that fosters better solutions, better policy making. So what an organization is trying to do instead is foster a safe haven where people can be vulnerable about their personal experiences and ideology, and also be tolerant of other people who may have grown up differently than themselves, may have immigrated to the United States, and that might be the reason for their political ideology. So I am really hoping that this myth about tackling affective polarization is dispelled, so more people become involved with communities that may be politically incongruent with them, and realize that there is so much to learn from other people especially if you disagree with them, because unfortunately in modern society, there are so many information silos. I mean, COVID-19 forced our reliance on news media in order to get any information about what's going on in society, what's going on across the world, which was something that was so important when we had a global pandemic that was threatening the lives of hundreds of thousands of people. So what happened, unfortunately, is that things like Fox News, CNN, the Washington Post all promoted different sort of versions of the truth, unfortunately, in order to appease the partisans or the ordinary Americans who would read the news. You know, information has become more about entertainment than simply truth, in my opinion, and that contributes to the political divides that we see today. And I'm hoping that through engaging with diverse perspectives, we get a broader understanding of truth and thus a more informed and civically engaged society.
What is your vision about your organization for next, let us say, 3 years?
Yeah, well, I'm a senior in high school right now. I'm busy with college applications. Yeah. I'm really hoping to get a new wave of young people passionate about this issue of affective polarization and involved, because I know a lot of times youth voices are so important about things like politics. And many times there isn't a voice or platform or even opportunity to have their voice acknowledged. So I'm hoping to have a younger person take the lead on this organization. Of course, I'll always be a helping hand, but yeah, I'd love to get more perspectives from young people. And I hope to grow the organization as well, to be a part of other nonprofits. We're currently involved with Listen First Project and other national nonprofits trying to build a larger community dedicated to tackling partisan antipathy across the United States. And I'm also hoping that our organization gains funding so that we can better support the volunteers who help us out, and also host events that can reach more people, as well as boost our social media posts that talk about the...
I love your website, by the way.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, we're hoping to expand that too. I created that in a time where I was really passionate about graphic design, but I know that there are people far more knowledgeable about ways to increase engagement on websites such as that, and create something that is really user-friendly so that people can access our resources, that are documentaries that are interesting that have come out about this issue, books, journal articles that we've read that really resonate with us. There are videos of people that are from different communities that come together in dialogue on there. So I'm hoping that more people can see those and get involved, and that means expanding the people who work on the nonprofit alongside me and my team.
That's very interesting. And what one advice will you give to the community you serve?
That's a good question. I would say that, in reference back to that story about South Florida and the transgender bill, conversations can really be a way to address our personal biases and become more educated about these issues so important to the core of who we are, things that are extremely contentious, like LGBTQ policies, police brutality, immigration, things of that sort. But the only way that these conversations can be effective is if we are tolerant and empathetic of our political opponents. Recent studies have indicated that when you come from the heart, when you talk about experiences important to yourself, that actually convinces your political opponents of your side more so than facts, figures, statistics. So, for example, if you are pro-gun control, if you say something about statistics of how many people die, that's not as effective as saying, I personally experienced a active shooter and I'm scared for my life, and that informs my decisions. In fact, one I think it was a Democratic congressional candidate. I think her last name is Giffords. She was involved in a shooting, and that made her really invested in gun control when she was in political office. And so if you say something like that, or even if you say something as simple as, I'm scared of being in an active shooting, I'm scared for my kids, or I'm scared for myself or my community to be harmed by guns or semi-automatic rifles, that makes people empathize more. But if you want to have empathy or receive empathy from others, you also have to empathize with them as well. You need to be open to hearing their experiences, even if you don't agree with it, even if you think, I don't think this is true, or I think that you're exaggerating the story, to just approach it with tolerance and empathy. And along those lines, at one of the workshops or one of the talks that I gave, I asked the crowd, how many of you have won every single argument that you've had with your family members?
Sure. Yeah.
And no one raised their hands. And I spoke about how we can't all be right 100% of the time, or 90%, or even 70%, because it doesn't add up numerically, right? So we have to know that we can't always be right. And so we have to forgive our opponents when sometimes they're wrong, when sometimes they commit an act of violence or intolerance that you think a moral person wouldn't do that, or a good person wouldn't do that. They're evil. They're not a good person. But it's important to note that you yourself might make mistakes, and you want forgiveness and empathy from them. And so it's sort of the golden rule to reciprocate that, and even approach conversations by doing that initially.
That was an inspiring conversation with you, Olivia, today. Thank you so much for your time. Keep up your good work, and let's stay in touch.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the podcast and acknowledging the impactful work of nonprofits in Silicon Valley. Please subscribe and share this episode with a friend. Thank you to our sponsor, TradeMyHome.com, for their community commitment and for making this podcast possible. Until next time, remember to support local nonprofits.